I remember every detail of that flight. The scratchy blue seats, the smell of recycled air and someone's leftover sandwich, the way the afternoon light filtered through those tiny airplane windows. I was doing what I always do when I'm nervous sketching. My pen moved across the paper in familiar strokes, bringing to life characters from my webcomic, Starlight Serenade. Two women finding love in a small town, their story unfolding panel by panel for thousands of anonymous readers who had no idea. Their favorite artist was just a 26-year-old introvert who'd rather draw feelings than talk about them. The woman beside me had been quiet for most of the flight, buried in a paperback romance novel. I'd noticed her when she sat down, how could I not? She had this warm energy that seemed to fill the space around her, dark hair that caught the light, and when she smiled at the flight attendant, I felt something flutter in my chest that I quickly buried in my sketchbook. But then she gasped. Not a startled gasp, more like recognition, wonder. Her eyes were fixed on my drawing, and I realized with growing horror that she could see exactly what I was working on. The intimate moment between my characters, the way I'd drawn their hands. Almost touching the soft expression on the blonde character's face that I'd been perfecting for months. Wait, she said, and her voice had this quality that made me look up, despite every instinct screaming at me to close the sketchbook and pretend this wasn't happening. You're that artist? The one who does Starlight Serenade. My pen froze. 3 years of publishing my webcomic, I managed to keep my identity completely secret. None of my friends knew. My family didn't know. I was just Kale. To my readers, mysterious, anonymous, safe. And now this beautiful stranger had blown my cover with a single glance. I managed, my voice cracking like a teenager's. Maybe. She was already reaching for her phone, and when she turned it toward me, I saw my own art staring back at me. Her lock screen was my most popular piece, the two main characters sharing their first kiss under a starlit sky. A drawing that had taken me 3 days to get right because I'd wanted to capture that perfect moment of falling. I can't believe this, she said, and the excitement in her voice made something warm unfurl in my chest. I've been reading your comic for 2 years. It's gotten me through some really difficult times. I stared at her, then at my art on her phone, then back at her. This gorgeous woman who I'd been stealing glances at for the past hour was a fan of my work, of the love story I'd been telling in secret, pouring my heart into every panel. I'm Amanda, she said, extending her hand, and I have about 600 questions for you. Kai, I replied, shaking her hand and trying not to notice. How perfectly it fit in mine. And I've never told anyone it was me. Her expression softened. Your secret's safe with me. The next 4 hours passed like minutes. We talked about everything: my art, her bookstore in Los Angeles, the way stories can save people, the loneliness of creating something beautiful and having no one to share it with. She told me about growing up in a conservative family, about finding refuge in books and stories where people like her could have happy endings. I told her about the weight of keeping secrets, about drawing love I'd never experienced myself. Somewhere over Arizona, our shoulders pressed together as we shared her blanket. I sketched her profile while she dozed, trying to capture the peaceful expression on her face, the way her eyelashes cast shadows on her cheeks. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever drawn, and I tucked it away before she could wake up and see it. When we landed in Los Angeles, I felt like I was leaving something important behind. But then Amanda turned to me as we gathered our bags and said, I know this is crazy, but I have a spare room. You said you were looking for a place to stay while you apartment hunt. I should have said no. I should have maintained boundaries, kept my distance, protected the careful walls I'd built around my heart. Instead, I heard myself saying, yes, Amanda's apartment was small, but filled with light. Books lined every available surface, plants cascaded from shelves, and there was this energy to the space that made it feel like home before I'd even unpacked my suitcase. Temporary, she said, handing me a spare key. Just until you find a place. Temporary. The word echoed in my head as I set up my art supplies in the corner of her living room. As I learned that she hummed off key while making coffee in the mornings. As I discovered that she read romance novels in the bathtub and left sticky notes with encouraging messages on my easel when she thought I was struggling with a particularly difficult panel. 6 weeks turned into 2 months. 2 months turned into realizing that the sound of her key in the lock at the end of the day had become my favorite sound in the world. I started a new webcomic series, Close Quarters, about two women navigating the complicated space between friendship and something more. It was more personal than anything I'd ever created, and it was inspired by the woman who sang to her plants and left me homemade lunches before she went to work. The comic exploded online. Readers fell in love with the characters, especially the bookstore owner, who was based so obviously on Amanda that I lived in constant fear she'd recognize herself. Comments poured in about the art, about the way I drew the love interest, about the tenderness in every panel. The way the artist draws her. It's like she's in love, one comment read. Amanda found that comment on a Tuesday morning, reading over my shoulder as I checked my notifications. The question hung in the air between us like a challenge. Are you, she asked quietly, in love? I felt my pen snap in half. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. I'd drawn her 100 times by then. Sketched her reading, sleeping, laughing at something on her phone. I'd captured the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, the gesture she made when she was thinking, the soft curve of her mouth when she was concentrating. I'd drawn her like she was the most beautiful thing in the world because, to me, she was. But saying it out loud? That was scarier than any deadline, any criticism, any fear of failure I'd ever faced. I started, then stopped. How do you tell someone that they've become the center of your universe? That every story you tell is really about them? That you've fallen so completely that you can't imagine your life without the sound of their laughter? Amanda reached over and gently took the broken pen from my fingers. It's okay, she said. You don't have to answer that, but I could see it in her eyes. She already knew. And maybe, just maybe, she felt the same way. Living with Amanda was like existing in a beautiful bubble that I knew couldn't last forever. Reality had a way of creeping in, usually in the form of family obligations and expectations that neither of us had quite figured out how to navigate. Her parents visited on a Thursday in October. I'd met them briefly over video calls, always introduced as my friend Kai, my roommate. They were polite but distant, the kind of people who smiled with their mouths but not their eyes. Conservative, traditional, the type who still asked Amanda when she was going to find a nice man to settle down with. The night before their arrival, Amanda went through the apartment like a hurricane, tucking away anything that might seem too personal, too intimate. My art supplies were moved to the bedroom. The sketches I'd left on the coffee table disappeared. Even the coffee mug I'd been using for months, the one with the chip on the handle that she'd insisted I keep, was relocated to a high shelf. It's just easier this way, she said, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. I understood. I did. But it still felt like being erased. During their visit, I was the perfect roommate. Polite, helpful, and visible when necessary. I watched Amanda transform into someone I barely recognized, smaller, quieter, carefully neutral. When her mother made pointed comments about what a good friend I was, letting their Amanda stay with me, I smiled and agreed. When her father questioned why Amanda was taking so long to find her own place, I made jokes about the Los Angeles housing market, But at night, lying in Amanda's bed, because we'd been sharing it for weeks, though neither of us had acknowledged what that meant, I felt the distance between us like a physical ache. We were a secret again, just not the fun kind. The explosion came after her parents left. Amanda had been quiet all day, moving through the apartment like she was walking through water. I found her in the kitchen that evening, standing at the sink, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Hey," I said, reaching for her. "It's okay. They're gone now." She turned, and the pain in her eyes stopped me cold. "Is it okay? Is any of this okay?" "Amanda." "I lied to them," she said, her voice breaking. "I lied to my parents about who I am, about what this is, about everything that matters to me. I'm 32 years old, and I'm still hiding." I wanted to comfort her, to tell her that it was okay, that I understood that we could take things at whatever pace she needed. But the words stuck in my throat because I was tired of hiding too. Tired of being the secret, the thing that couldn't be acknowledged, the love that had to be tucked away whenever real life intruded. "I'm not ashamed of us," she continued, tears streaming down her face. "I'm just ... scared." I reached for her then, but she stepped back, and the distance between us felt like a chasm. "Maybe," I said quietly, "that's the problem." That night, I slept on the couch for the first time in months. In the morning, Amanda left for work early, and I spent the day staring at a blank page, unable to draw anything that wasn't heartbreak. 3 weeks passed in careful politeness. We danced around each other in the apartment, cordial roommates instead of whatever we'd been before. I threw myself into my work, but even my fictional characters seemed to be suffering from the tension. In the house, my readers noticed, "What happened to the spark?" One comment read, "It feels like the characters are afraid to touch each other." They weren't wrong. I was afraid to draw love when my own heart was breaking. I probably would have continued in that miserable limbo forever, but Amanda had always been braver than me. She just needed time to remember it. I was walking to the coffee shop on a Tuesday afternoon when I saw the crowd gathered outside Amanda's bookstore. Not an unusual sight. She often hosted author readings and book clubs, but something about the energy felt different, excited, celebratory, curious. I pushed through the crowd and stopped dead when I saw the window display. My art, everywhere. Professional prints of panels from close quarters, arranged like a gallery exhibition. And underneath, a banner that read, "Queer Literature, curated by Amanda Chen." My heart stopped. Then started again, faster than before. I pushed through the door, barely registering the customers browsing the news section, the rainbow flags hanging from the ceiling, the way people were taking photos and talking in excited whispers. All I could see was Amanda behind the register, chin raised, eyes bright with something that looked like defiance and determination and maybe, just maybe, love. She saw me and her expression shifted, became uncertain. Kai, I didn't let her finish. I crossed the store in 3 strides, took her face in my hands, and kissed her. Right there, in front of everyone, in the middle of her bookstore, in the middle of her new life that she'd built around, being proud of who she was. The customers erupted in cheers. Someone whistled. I heard the distinct sound of phones capturing the moment, but I didn't care. All I cared about was the way Amanda melted into the kiss, the way her hands fisted in my shirt, the way she smiled against my lips. When we broke apart, she was crying, but it was the good kind of crying this time. "No more hiding," she whispered, and it sounded like a promise. "No more hiding," I agreed. That night, she told me she loved me for the first time. I told her. I'd been drawing her love story for months, that every panel I created was really about her, about us, about the way she'd changed everything just by seeing me. We made love in her bed, our bed, with the curtains open and the lights on, no longer afraid of being seen. A year later, Amanda had the crazy idea to book the same flight. For old time's sake, she said, grinning as she showed me the tickets. Anniversary trip. I thought she was being sentimental, which was unlike her in the most wonderful way. What I didn't know was that she'd been planning something for months. We settled into our seats, the same row, the same configuration, and I couldn't help but smile at the memory. The woman sitting next to me now was different from the one who'd gasped at my art a year ago. More confident, more settled in her own skin. She'd come out to her parents 6 months earlier. It had gone better than expected, though there was still work to be done, and her bookstore had become a hub for queer literature in LA. She was radiant with a kind of happiness that comes from living authentically. I can't believe it's been a year, I said, reaching for her hand as the plane taxied toward the runway. I can't believe I almost let you get away, she replied, but there was something nervous in her voice, something that made me look at her more carefully. The plane hit turbulence somewhere over Nevada, and Amanda's hand tightened in mine. But when I looked at her, she was smiling, and she was reaching into her carry-on bag with her free hand. Kai, she started, and I knew. Somehow, I knew what was coming, and my heart began to race. But then I was laughing, because I was reaching into my own bag, pulling out the small velvet box I'd been carrying around for 3 weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. We both froze, staring at each other's rings, twin expressions of shock and delight on our faces. You've got to be kidding me, Amanda said, but she was laughing too. I was going to wait until we got to the hotel, I said, still holding my ring box. I had this whole speech planned. So did I, she admitted. About how you drew me into existence, how you made me believe in love stories with happy endings. The flight attendant appeared beside us, taking in the scene with obvious delight. Are you two? Getting engaged, Amanda said, grinning, apparently to each other. The woman clapped her hands together. Oh my God, this is so sweet. Can I get everyone's attention? Before we could protest, she was making an announcement over the intercom, and suddenly the entire plane was watching as Amanda and I fumbled through the most unconventional proposal in aviation history. Yes, I said, sliding the ring onto her finger, obviously yes. Yes, she replied, doing the same for me. Yes to everything. The plane erupted in applause. Someone started crying. The flight attendant took about 50 photos. And somewhere in the middle of it all, I realized that this was exactly how our story was supposed to go, messy and unexpected and witnessed by strangers who became part of our love story just by being there. Later, as we flew through the night, Sky, Amanda's head on my shoulder, both of us admiring our new rings, I thought about all the stories I'd told over the years, all the love I'd drawn for other people, all the happy endings I created from scratch. I'm going to turn this into a comic, I said quietly. Our story, all of it, really? Amanda asked, lifting her head to look at me. Really? I want everyone to know that sometimes the best love stories are the ones that start with being seen by the right person. She smiled, the expression soft and content and absolutely perfect. What will you call it? I thought about it for a moment. About the woman who gasped at my art and changed my life. About the fear and the courage and the way love had a habit of surprising you when you least expected it. The artist's heart, I said finally, because that's what you found on that first flight, and that's what you've had ever since. Amanda kissed me then, right there in our airplane seats, and I knew that this was just the beginning. Some stories deserve sequels. Some love stories are meant to be told and retold, drawn and redrawn, shared with the world because they're too beautiful to keep secret. Ours? This was just volume 1. The plane carried us through the night toward whatever came next, and I found myself looking forward to every page of our story yet to be written. After all, the best plot twists are the ones that feel inevitable in hindsight. Unloving Amanda Chan felt like the most inevitable thing in the world. Love, as it turns out, is the best plot twist of all.